Now, we've learned in the last day or so about the complexities of stamp duty. Even the Housing Secretary herself, Angela Rayner, fell foul of the rules. It comes at a time when the government is rumoured to be looking at property taxes as a way of raising money in the budget. So what are the options open to Rachel Reeves? And should we be paying more tax on our homes? Well, when I'm trying to figure out the answers to questions like this, I often have a chat with Evan. He sits a couple of desks along from me. Today, we talked taxing homes.
I think it is an area ripe for reform, and with the reform comes opportunity for raising revenue. I should say at the outset, though, Sarah, that the one thing tax economists really all agree on is that stamp duty is a terrible tax, and you ideally would get rid of that, which would lose you billions of revenue every year. I mean, stamp duty's become a real mess. And indeed, the tax expert looking at the Angela Rayner controversy, the question that would be for them, apart from, did she get the right advice, all of that, would be, why on earth do you have a tax system where an obscure legal construct around the trust of a 17-year-old is different from the trust for the 18-year-old and leads to a difference in tax of £40,000. I mean, why? So economists hate arbitrary boundaries in the tax system that lead to big difference in tax liability. So that's the starting point. You'd be getting rid of stamp duty. It is a tax on moving. And
getting rid of it entirely?
Well, most economists, I think, would say it is a terrible tax. Now, the reason why we have the tax and why that is one of our big property taxes, and it's really important, for everybody to understand this, is that the public, by and large, hate taxes that come in the form of an annual bill that you just have to pay, find the money for and pay, like council tax. The public tend to prefer and tolerate taxes which are linked to a transaction. I earn some money, the government takes a slice. That I can deal with because I know I'm earning some money when I pay the income tax. Or I buy something and I pay VAT at the same time. That is a sort of simple way of paying tax because it's linked to a transaction. And stamp duty is linked to a transaction. You always have the money to pay it because you're buying the house at the same time. But it's not a good tax.
Okay, but we should say we're talking about, 14 billion?
I mean, billions, yeah. And
it's coming down, presumably because the housing market isn't very...
Yeah, it's very cyclical with the housing market. But look, I mean, put aside whether or not you can afford to take away the tax that everyone agrees is a really bad tax and unnecessarily complicated. The truth is, we are somewhat under-taxing owner occupation and housing in general relative to other things we consume and earn. And that's why I think it is an area where a Chancellor ought to look.
And it's why all over the summer we have had these countless kites flown about, perhaps we could, impose capital gains tax on your main home, which of course is exempt at the moment.
Yeah, OK, so that's a very controversial one for good reason. Again, you only pay the capital gains tax when you move, so it would only be a tax charge triggered when you move, so it's a disincentive to move. And I mean, the real problem with it, I think, is that if you sell one place and pay capital gains tax on that, you're going to buy another place and you may not really think of yourself as being richer because you made a capital gain on the one you're selling, but you're paying a lot more for the one you're buying. And so you're not going
to move.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem necessarily like you're richer from the capital gain you enjoyed. So that one, I think, is... Yeah, that's problematic. I think the area where I think economists think they should look is particularly around the more expensive homes and the way they're treated under council tax. So here's the basic rule. Council tax is not proportional to property values. It's levied on the bands. We all know about that. We know the bands are out of date. That's something you might want to think about reforming. But it's levied on different bands. But £1 million property doesn't pay twice as much tax as a £500,000 property. So it's not proportional. And I think the area, a very eminent property housing economist, John Muellbauer, wrote a piece this week saying what he would do is on the upper bands, turn it into a proportional tax, 0.5% of the value of the property paid each year. So £1 million property would pay a £5,000 tax each year, a proportional tax on the value of a home. So you'd be getting a lot more from the upper end of the income distribution. It would be progressive. It would be tax efficient in that it would be taxing something that at the moment is undertaxed relative to everything else we buy and own.
Okay, so for houses that are valued lower, they continue paying council tax?
Well, that was his suggestion. He was like, just worry about it on the upper end.
But once you get to a threshold, and whose judgment is
well, you can argue about the details, Sarah.
It's quite an argument, though, isn't it?
No,
Which is
it will all be
one of the reasons council tax hasn't been addressed in so long. Is
Yeah.
how do you decide what the value of a home
Well,
is?
I want to give you the other part of what John Muellbauer said, because I think this is the most important part. The inhibition to charging high taxes on expensive properties is that there are lots of people, particularly elderly people living in old family homes, that they didn't pay much for in the 1980s, but now are worth £1 million in the south of England. These pensioners can't afford to pay £5,000 a year in a property tax because they have a lovely house, but they don't have much income. And that has made it very difficult. And the John Muellbauer suggestion is that you should let people roll over the tax till the house is sold. So you charge 0.5% of the value each year, 5,000 on £1 million home. But you can call it 6,000 under John Muellbauer's approach. You can make it 6,000 and delay paying it until you die or that you sell the property. And then
it rolls up.
And then it rolls up. And that would get you over, if you like, the problem of the pensioner with lots of housing and not much money.
Okay. And unless, I suppose, there is an argument that it encourages people to leave the large houses that they no longer need, and if it were annual.
Well, I mean,
there'd be an uproar.
There would. I think I think the uproar is one of the inhibitions here. And again, this is because any property tax like this is a tax you pay out of the blue. Each year you just get a bill and have to pay it. It's not tied to a transaction. You may not have the money to pay it. And I think that's the real inhibition here. But
and you mentioned that it would address the how you value a house question because a house is valued on death.
No, well, you would have, for the
sale.
tax, to know what the tax is, you would have to value the house. You would need to know the value of the house. So that's why I think Muellbauer doesn't think you want to do it for every house. It's better to focus on the ones at the top end.
It's a huge housing stock.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, it is. It's a very big. It is a practical problem. I mean, you don't have to do them every year, do you? You can do them every 5 years and uprate on using averages between them. But, at the moment, we haven't revalued the housing stock for tax purposes for decades. This just shows it's an absolutely fraught area, Sarah. People do not like, as I say, they don't like property taxes. They didn't like rates when we had rates.
Yeah.
We replaced it with a poll tax to get it away from housing. They didn't like that. We get back to
the politics of introducing this change, because it's significant. It would be hugely significant.
No, well, if it isn't going to be very painful, it's not going to raise you very much money. And as we think the Chancellor needs or want a couple of tens of billions, that sort of order, somebody's going to notice that when they have to come to pay it. So this is an idea for raising some billions, and it.
There's a logic in it.
There's a tax logic in it. That's where you are. But I, honestly, if you were thinking starting again on property taxes, well, the economists love the land tax, Sarah. Don't tax the building, tax the value of the land.
Because land has gone up higher than buildings.
Well, also that, no one creates the land and the value of the land. They create the value of the building.
You can put something beautiful on it.
Yeah, don't disincentivize them. Don't tax them putting something valuable on it. That's the bit they deliver. Just tax them on the
space.
The actual space, which is kind of society creates the value from that. So look, all of that. But, however, this, you wouldn't necessarily start from here, I suppose, is the...
And also just the emotional connection people have with their homes and the idea that you're going to be clobbered. So politically, so challenging.
Well, owner-occupation is, if you like, an aspiration many, many people have, and they don't want to feel it's being penalised. But at the moment, it is worth saying, owner occupation is lightly taxed compared to rent. The more people rent, if you and I, owner occupiers, swapped homes and then rented each other's homes, so I was your tenant and you were my tenant, immediately I would pay you rent and you'd pay tax on it. You'd pay me rent, I'd pay tax on it. So immediately the government would be snatching a lot of the value of our occupation of the same two homes. So the rental sector is very heavily taxed compared to owner occupation.
I'd quite like to move into your really tidy home, can I say? I'm just imagining it. Evan and me are figuring it out. And as usual, we're going to post our full conversation on BBC Sounds. We'll put the video up on YouTube. We'll post the links on X at Sarah_Montague, at Evan HD, and at BBC World at 1.